Space Glaze Part 1, Donut Hole Beyond Control by W.M. Cuppernell. Chapter 1, The Wild West of Space 9 Galaxies Away from the Moon. At the outer reaches of space, in a territory where star cruisers and space tourists roamed free, where laws were tossed aside, and all the planets where life existed, all explorers were reckless in their search for the perfect space photo op, seeing an intergalactic space celebrity E, or risking their spacecraft and their lives. Just taking a selfie on the fiery planet of Sunburn, or the icy rings Freezebania, where just the slightest bite of the air would turn any alien species into a popsicle. The only species that could take the cold were native Freezebanians, but they treated all visitors frosty, just like their planet's weather. The lawless region called Freetopia, in the outer limits of remoteness, alongst the outskirts of the tropical but mostly aquatic moon of Paradiso, something had to be done about travelers and space racers who took advantage by the lawlessness by pushing their craft of up and past warp speed, causing accidents and space junk so much that insurance rates across the entire galaxy rose sharply. All carriers went broke, and the only one that would take new customers was on the tiny planet called Scammerific, with odd beings called fraudsters that lived up with the name, charging crazy rates, and never answering their calls or messages, and only paying when a planet full of judges known as the Order forced them to. It was a crazy Wild Wild West type of star system, where every planet was almost a literal description of their species' inhabitants. Chapter 2, Copsylvania and the Crackdown. Something had to be done, so the 100 planets that had life amongst the 400 billion in the solar system had to lay down the law. They all established a group of law enforcement open to species on any known planets and trained them at the rigorous Academy of Copsylvania, where all were taught to catch and ticket space speeders. In order to catch the speedsters, all the planets sent their best space designers and flooded it with money. They came up with a craft called the V100 2X Lightspeeder that nobody in the 2 trillion known galaxies could outrace. All ticketers had to pay their tickets on Planet Order or attend the traffic school where the logo was, "Chill out, you'll live longer." Chapter 3, Enter Space Glaze. Since the Copsylvania Academy was producing more police and space tourism was becoming more frequent, there was not one diner in the area to feed the police, or interplanetary travelers had no place to stop rest. Let the kids and pet species to stretch their legs. The planet of pastry, a delicious area near the sprinkled moon, knew that Space Patrol and all creatures loved a good donut. Their answer was called Space Glaze. Space Glaze, whose motto was, "The last donut hole before the black hole," was the only place to let the hair, or lack of it, or place to relax and have a donut. It also had a hotel called Spaced Out and a diner called Better Than Nothing. The food was blah, but the views were great. They even had an enclosed spacewalk where you could take your pets. It was nice, but came with a warning: not picking up from your pet is a crime. Do it now or pay the fine, $300. 0 star dollars was too much for all travelers, and all obeyed, making sure the walk remained beautiful. The hotel was not bad. Every guest had their space capsule. For an extra 20 star dollars, you could get a view of the outer rings of Fryland, where the outer rings are edible onion rings, and every city and town had gave out and smelled of fresh French fries, though there was some discrimination between fat French fries and skinny, and curly fries were only served to the wealthy. Chapter 4, French Fries and Donut Diplomacy. Space Glaze was always packed solid 24/7 with travelers, not because of the donuts or service, because it was the only place this side of space. One time, a group of wealthy beings from planet Sunburn tried to open a new diner on the about 4 million miles from the A-Sun called Burnt Bacon, called Bun and Sun, but it never got the crowds, due the smell, and the heat. Music was always playing, and on the weekends, a cosmic rock band called the Space Glazers would entertain the crowds. Space Patrol was keeping everyone safe, but every once in a while, spacers would either forget to pay their bill or just speed off thinking they could outrun Space Patrol, but the cops were all great pilots, and with the VX-100 2X Lightspeeder, They would always get caught unless they reached Planet Milkshake with its ice cream river, where the radar of the VX-100 would lose them over Pie Valley due to all the fruit pie, especially apple season, where cooked apples and cinnamon would get all over their craft, taking weeks of cleanup. Luckily for the patrol, it rarely happened. Parking for Space Glaze was always a problem, forcing many to park behind the diner Better Than Nothing, which wasn't a problem, unless it was after 7 p.m. when the diner closed, and the Better Than Nothing served nothing but charged for parking a crazy amount, or faced space towing, which was ran by the meanies, a short but cruel people who would only give your spacecraft back after you paid $1,000. 00 star dollars, and they finished making fun of you. Chapter 5, Donut Duty Diverse Deputies. Every day and night working at different hours, Space Patrol was always on call. They had no weapons, but patrol officers of Planet Octopus-Strand were heavily armed, by no less than 8 of them. The bakers of Space Glaze were always busy, making donuts, serving soda, or covered in flour. They always complained that they rolled the dough, but barely made any in terms of money. All in all, the Space Patrol's members were made up from every planet, from the Dachshunds, dog-like humanoids, to the Mercats, a combination of mermaid and cat, that were comfortable on land and water and could climb anything like nothing. All were experts in the field, but one pilot stood out who went by the name Captain Cool, born in Sunburn but left because he couldn't take the heat. He tried to move to Freezebania, but was given a frosty welcome and was forced to leave. He was a star orphan that had to be sponsored to get into the Academy's first class. But once in, he was top of his class, and he was the best on catching racers, earning lots of awards. He was also a peacemaker from Planet Sandwich, where the 2 kingdoms of Peanut Butter and Jelly Captain Cool brought them together. Chapter 6, Rise of Captain Cool. He was also the hero of the Bubblegum Wars, which was a very sticky situation. The beings on Bubblegum were nice beings, but all their space tourist and patrol officers would leave remains of sticky gum on the floor, or the seats, which would always get on the workers' hands and shoes when they tried to clean after they ate. It was a lot to chew on, and Space Glaze had enough and put out a sign that read, "If you're from Bubblegum, you must eat in your craft. We will serve you some." On hearing this, the ruler of Bubblegum, named King Huge Bubble, gathered his army General Yum, and planned to invade Space Glaze using their huge rocket force and their main weapon cannon called Sticky Sweet, that when fired gut gum everywhere, it would start delicious, but its flavor lasted only a few minutes. But afterwards, the gum was impossible to remove unless you had scrapers, and they were in short supply in this universe. The Confederation of Planets was prepared to fight back, as Space Glaze was the main moneymaker for all the planets. From all 99 other planets, draft notices were sent, gum sales went down, and on Bubblegum, the factories that produced all the gum in the star system shut down. The beings became unemployed, which further made the king angry. He was ready to attack, and the other planets were not backing down. They kept the no bubblegum beings inside ban. Everyone was sure there no hope for peace in Space Glaze, and if the war went galactic, their planets would be covered in sticky gum, annoying all beings and creatures, making the planet almost unlivable. Huge money was spent trying to create shields of non-stick glass, but it was too hard in space. All hope was lost until Captain Cool got an idea and presented it to the leader to all planets, and it was agreed that his idea was the best. They asked for a meeting with King Huge Bubble, who gave a huge, sticky smile when he heard it. They all agreed that all bubblegum beings would be allowed back at Space Glaze, but they had to agree to wear a wrapper. Peace was declared, and war worries ended. Captain Cool was the hero and was presented with an air-conditioned spacesuit that kept him at a comfortable 68 degrees. Chapter 7, Harmony and Sprinkles. Everything was going fine in the universe, especially at Space Glaze. The patrol officers had a headquarters in the back of the donut shop. Some of the patrol pilots were eating too many donuts and could no longer fit into their craft, and had to be put on a strict diet with lots of exercise. Space racers and tourists still were being ticketed around the solar system for exceeding the speed limit of 1,750 miles an hour in the galaxy, but within the Space Glaze area it was 45, and most of the ticketed was due to parking. Almost nobody could get away from Space Patrol. Peace and harmony were everywhere. Space Glaze was added to a huge theme park with rocket rides, a fun house where every mirror turned the beings into a donut, and a glaze river, where sticky waves would come in with sugary deliciousness. The domed roller coaster called the Donut Drop, where it had 15 loops and hills taking you around the donut shop, and you left sprinkled you head to toe with fun. Chapter 8, Trouble from Planet ARR. But nobody knew trouble was brewing. The Confederation knew about the 100 known planets in the solar system, and all were in contact and were in harmony, but there was actually 101, a rogue planet hidden just 1,000,000 miles due west of the black hole, where every craft avoided. It was called R, full of outcasts from every planet. They wore eye patches and robbed and took over spacecraft and even islands and towns in every area of space but their own. They had grown rich and were hunted in all the other solar systems, but remoteness had been left alone. They were now ready to start taking on more in their own galaxy, and Space Glaze was the main target on the list. They also had huge pirate ships looking like the ones on planet Earth from hundreds of years ago. But they had a secret weapon, 4 Captain Hook rockets, that were faster than the VX-100 2X light speeders. While everywhere throughout the solar system slept or were going about their day or evening happily, trouble was brewing. Space Glaze and the Patrol were in for a big surprise. Their pastry life was about to end as pirate ships with pirates' flags closed in. The pirates from planet ARR were ready to take control. They wanted the dough, both the ones that you can eat and the dough you can spend. The end. The story continues in part 2.